I joked she should escape with me. She grabbed her bag before I finished the sentence. The confidence never wavered. Not loud, not angry, just the kind of certainty that comes from a lifetime of people stepping aside. I looked at him through the rain. He was close enough now for me to see the details, the expensive watch, the polished shoes that had never met a muddy campsite, the careful expression of a man trying very hard to appear reasonable. Vivian sat inside the truck without moving. The window was still down. The man glanced toward her. "Vivian," he said, softer this time. "Can we please talk about this like adults?" She stared straight ahead. "I've spent 3 hours talking about it like adults." His jaw tightened. Then he turned back to me, offering a polite smile that somehow made me trust him even less. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this." A fascinating sentence, because nobody had actually caught me in anything. I was standing in my own parking lot beside my own truck. Yet somehow he had already positioned himself as the reasonable person managing a misunderstanding. Vivian gave a short laugh from inside the cab. "See?" she said. The man ignored her. "She's upset." "I'm aware," I said. "She always does this when conversations become difficult." There was a tiny shift beside me. Not from him. From Vivian. A flinch. Barely visible. But I saw it. Because Sandra used to do the same thing whenever doctors explained bad news, using cheerful voices. Not at the bad news. At the way people tried to package it. The man continued. "I just need 10 minutes. Vivian finally looked at him. No. One word. Nothing dramatic. No tears. No yelling. Just no. The rain seemed louder afterward. The man exhaled slowly. "Vivian, after everything we've built together, no. After 6 years? No." His eyes flashed. Only for a second. But there it was. The first crack. The first glimpse of what lived underneath all that polished self-control. "You owe me that much." Vivian laughed again. This time it sounded tired. "No," she said. "That's actually the one thing I don't." Silence. The man's gaze shifted to me, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't about convincing her. It was about removing the witness. People like him preferred private conversations. Private conversations left room for revision later, for reinterpretation, for "that's not what I said," for "you're remembering it wrong," for "you're too emotional right now," for all the little tools that slowly made someone stop trusting their own mind. He stepped closer. "Sir," I hated that word immediately. Not because it was disrespectful, because it wasn't. It was perfectly respectful. Weaponized respect. "Sir," he repeated, "I don't know what she's told you." "Not much." "Then I think you should know you're helping her make a mistake." I considered that, then nodded. "Possible." His expression brightened slightly. "But she's 46, I continued. "Which means she's allowed to make her own mistakes." The brightness vanished. Behind me, Vivian made a choking sound that might have been a laugh. The man looked from me to the truck, then to Vivian. For the first time, uncertainty appeared. Not because he thought he'd lost, because he wasn't used to losing. Those are different things. "Vivian," his voice changed, dropped lower, more intimate, more dangerous. "I love you." The words hung there, rain dripping from the awning, water running through the gutters, the entire parking lot holding its breath. Vivian closed her eyes. For a moment I thought she might get out, might walk back, might give him the 10 minutes, the hour, the 6th chance, the 17th, whatever number this had become. Instead, she opened her eyes and said quietly, "No, Graham." His face went still. "You love being right." The sentence landed harder than a slap, because it wasn't angry. It was exhausted. The exhaustion of someone who had already argued this case 100 times inside their own head. Graham stared at her. Then he looked away first. That told me everything. Not what happened. Not why she left. Just who understood the truth. People telling lies usually maintain eye contact longer than people telling the truth. They're waiting to see if it worked. Graham's shoulders sagged. For the first time, he looked his age. Maybe older. Then he nodded once. "Fine." Nobody answered. He took 2 steps backward. Then 3 more. Rain soaked through his coat. At the edge of the parking lot, he stopped, looked at Vivian one final time, and walked away. Neither of us spoke until he disappeared around Building C. Then I climbed into the truck, closed the door. The silence inside felt enormous. Vivian stared through the windshield. I started the engine. The old truck rumbled awake. After a minute, she said, You can still change your mind. I put the truck in reverse, backed out slowly, probably, and leave me at the nearest gas station. Very possible. She nodded. Reasonable. Extremely. We reached the exit of the apartment complex. The sign stood there in the rain. Welcome home. I stopped at the intersection, looked left, looked right, then headed toward the highway. Beside me, Vivian leaned her head back against the seat. For the first time all morning, she looked like someone who wasn't preparing for battle. Just someone tired. Very tired. After several miles, she glanced over. Owen? Yeah, thank you. I kept my eyes on the road. Don't thank me yet. Why not? Because I make terrible coffee in that trailer. For 2 full seconds, she said nothing. Then she laughed. A real laugh. The kind that starts unexpectedly and escapes before a person can stop it. And somehow, hearing it felt more dangerous than inviting her into the truck had. Lori stood there breathing hard, rain running from her hair and dripping off her jaw. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Vivian said the one thing I didn't expect. How long did you know? Not is it true. Not where is he? How long? Lori's face crumpled immediately. Too quickly for it to be an act. A month. The answer hit harder than shouting would have. Vivian looked away. A month. Not one bad decision. Not one panicked moment. 30 days. 30 days of phone calls, family dinners, conversations, and every single one carrying a secret. Lori took a step forward. I didn't know he was going to do this. You knew enough. Viv, you knew enough. The words weren't loud. That made them worse. The forest seemed to grow quieter around us. I suddenly felt like an intruder standing in a room built long before I arrived. Lori wiped rain from her face. He said you weren't thinking clearly. Vivian laughed. Not bitter this time. Just tired. The kind of laugh people make when reality finally becomes too ridiculous to carry. Did he? He said you were paranoid. Another laugh. He always does. He said you were making up stories. That one landed differently. Vivian's shoulders straightened. A tiny movement. But important. Because for the first time all day she didn't look defeated. She looked angry. Lori. Her sister fell silent. Tell me one story. What? One. Rain tapped softly against the trailer roof. Vivian stepped forward. Tell me one story I made up. Lori's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. Nothing came out. Because that was the problem with people like Marcus. The manipulation wasn't built from lies. It was built from truth. Tiny truths. Carefully arranged. Just enough reality to support a completely false conclusion. Vivian waited. Lori stared at the ground. Finally, she whispered, You didn't make things up. No. But sometimes, no. The word cracked like a branch. Lori flinched. Vivian continued. He insulted me. Silence. He monitored my email. Silence. He tracked my spending. Silence. He threatened every lawyer who took my case. Lori's eyes filled. Vivian took another step. And when I told you those things happened, a long pause. You believe me? Lori started crying. Because that was the tragedy. She believed every fact. She just didn't believe what all the facts meant when placed together. Marcus had spent years teaching everyone around him that individual raindrops were harmless, never letting them notice the flood. Headlights suddenly flashed through the trees. All three of us turned. A vehicle, coming fast. Too fast for the narrow road. Lori's face went white. That's him. The headlights bounced between the trunks. Getting closer. The engine loud now. I felt something settle inside me. A calmness. The kind that occasionally appears when things become bad enough that uncertainty finally disappears. I set down the cast iron skillet, reached for my phone, and dialed 911. Vivian looked at me. Marcus's SUV burst into the clearing. Gravel sprayed. The vehicle slid sideways before stopping. The driver's door opened immediately. Marcus stepped out. No umbrella. No careful smile. No polished manners. Interesting. Very interesting. Because pressure doesn't create character. It reveals it. Marcus pointed at Vivian. Get in the car. Nobody moved. His eyes shifted to Lori. You. Lori actually took a step backward. I told you to stay with me. The fear on her face answered questions nobody had asked. Marcus noticed me holding the phone. What are you doing? Talking to the police. His expression changed. Just slightly. But enough. Because men who know they're right usually welcome witnesses. Men who don't, often don't. The police, he said. For what? I looked at the SUV, then at him, then back at the SUV. Well, I said, for starters, maybe they can explain why a man seeking emergency guardianship is chasing a supposedly unstable woman through a forest at night using a tracking device. The silence afterward was beautiful. Marcus's confidence didn't disappear, but it stumbled, and for a man like him, that was almost the same thing. Behind me, Vivian stood very still, not hiding, not running. For the first time since she'd climbed into my truck that morning, she looked like a woman who had stopped retreating, and Marcus knew it. I could see it in his face. He hadn't come here to bring her home. He had come here because he could feel control slipping through his fingers. And control, I was beginning to understand, was the only thing he had ever truly loved. Why? Vivian asked. Because I signed that affidavit. Lori looked like someone who had finally collapsed under the weight of her own choices. He wrote it. I told myself most of it was true. I told myself I was afraid of losing the help he was giving us. I was wrong, Viv. I was so wrong. Outside, the sound of an engine rose along the gravel road. I called Ruth Nakamura. He's here. The police are on their way, she replied immediately. I called after I saw the photos. Stay inside the trailer. Record everything. Vivian looked at the ring. Then she straightened. She turned on her phone, hit record, and placed it on the table. Marcus stood near my truck in his expensive coat, rain striking his silver-streaked hair. He looked at the trailer, then at me through the window, smiling as if the two of us were simply being ridiculous. Mr. Hartley, he called. You've had your little adventure. Send my wife out. Future ex-wife, Vivian said. He stepped closer. Vivian, if you let this continue, I'll make sure everyone sees you for who you really are. The paintings, the ring, Daniel. Lori spoke up. What happened with Daniel? Marcus's control slipped another notch. He was a drunk who thought sleeping with lonely clients made him a hero. He smiled. Who do you think suggested the toxicology angle to the police? The clearing fell silent except for the rain. Ruth Nakamura's voice came through my phone. Please tell me that was recorded. It was, I said. Blue police lights flashed between the trees. Before I could stop her, Lori opened the trailer door and stepped out into the rain. She stood between Marcus and the approaching patrol car. He threatened us, she shouted before he could speak. He put a tracking device in my sister's art supplies. He made me sign a false affidavit, and he just admitted to interfering in the investigation of Daniel Vance's death. Marcus looked at her as if he no longer recognized the woman standing there. Vivian stepped down beside her sister, clutching the wooden paint box against her chest. I followed, still holding the cast iron skillet. At that point, putting it down felt almost rude. Marcus wasn't arrested that afternoon. Life rarely wraps itself up that neatly. But he was no longer invisible. The recording was handed over to Ruth Nakamura. So was the tracking device hidden beneath the paint compartment. Lori withdrew her affidavit. The police filed their report. And for the first time, Marcus had to stand in the light. Later, after everyone had gone, Vivian sat at the trailer table wearing one of my old flannel shirts. The emerald ring rested on the table in front of her. She stared at it for a long time. I thought leaving would feel like freedom, she said. What does it feel like? She gave a small laugh, like surgery without anesthesia. I nodded. Freedom is overrated on the first day. She looked at me then, exhausted, rain-soaked, alive. I ruined your trip. I glanced around the trailer. Mud on the floor, coffee cups in the sink, a cast iron skillet on the counter, and a woman sitting across from me whose entire life had just shattered apart and yet somehow was still holding the pieces herself. No, I said. You just changed the route. 6 months later, Vivian's exhibition opened in Seattle under the title Florence's Windows. The emerald ring sat in a glass case beside the first canvas, accompanied by a small plaque, a gift from the woman who refused to forget. Marcus's reputation didn't collapse overnight, but it began to rot in public, and that was enough. Lori and Vivian didn't magically heal, either. Sisters don't erase betrayal with a single apology, but they started with coffee, then phone calls, then honesty. As for me, I still take the trailer out every October. The difference is that now there are 2 mugs in the cabinet, a paint box beneath the bed, and a woman who insists my emergency chili lacks emotional depth. Sometimes, when rain taps against the trailer roof and the highway stretches endlessly ahead, Vivian reaches over and takes my hand. And every single time, I think about that morning in the apartment parking lot. The joke, the suitcase, the single word that changed everything. Okay, what would you do if you jokingly invited your neighbor on a road trip and she said yes, as if she'd been waiting for someone to ask? And have you ever had a completely unexpected moment turn into the beginning of something much bigger than either of you planned? Share your story in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.